So thank you so much for chatting with us.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
Oh, so I'm very excited to chat to you about your film. Uh it's going to be screening on the 10th of July in the Palace and the Galway Film Fleadh. But before we get to your film, I'd love to just learn about you as a creative. Um, I mean, there's not one person who hasn't seen you perform in something who wouldn't recognize your voice, your face. But just what's interesting is that changing of creative hats, and I just would like you to tell me a little bit more about your journey in like acting, how you perceive acting, and then how that kind of transcends into storytelling for you.
Yeah. Oh God. Yes. Lovely, lovely question. And I'll try to not take a 30 minutes
Oh
to
no, no, I
answer
love this.
it.
No, no, I'm gonna keep I'm digging down. So like I'm just gonna keep
Okay.
asking loads of
Okay.
extra little questions. Yeah.
Great. So I think that a lot of times people say like, what do you prefer, acting or directing? And I always say that like I feel like they've all been kind of the same job to me in that, I started out, I actually started out, for people that don't know, as a stand-up comic. That was like my first kind of job in the business. And a big part of that is writing your own material and performing it. And so then I got a show called Talk Soup, which was, kind of a combination of writing and improvisation, but I did a lot of writing on that show. And then when that show ended, I loved how much we would write like 70 pages a day. It was like, it didn't seem like it when you watch the show, but we did a lot of writing for it. It was very much like a make a plan so you can throw out the plan kind of show.
And would this be
And
in a room? Would you have a room of writers that you'd be
we
working?
did have a we did have a writer's room. Yeah, like a big part of the process on Talk Soup was that they would watch all these clips. They would select the clips for the show. People would come in and kind of pitch ideas for those bits. And when I took the show over, it had very much been kind of clip joke, but we turned it into more of a variety show. We would do sketches and kind of produce pieces, and so it just became a really, in a lot of great ways, like a really writing intensive job. And so then when that show went off the air, I really missed all the writing I was doing. And so I started writing, more long form pieces. I ended up writing some scripts and I wrote a book. And so that evolved into this life of being, much more of a prolific writer. I wrote a movie, that an action film, and was really, really fortunate at the time. This was a million years ago, to get some interest from some producers, and I ended up working with John Woo and his company on this film that was like this kind of like actiony, this like female two-hander, and as we were developing the script and I was talking about it, I kept saying like, listen, you have such clarity on this movie. It really feels like you should direct it. And at the time, it was flattering, but I really had no idea what that meant. Do you know what I mean? I hadn't gone to film school. I felt very much like, and I'm really just a nerd. You know what I mean? I don't like to. I like to do my homework. I don't like to rush in without knowing what I'm doing. So I was like, okay, I have no idea what that means. I'm going to go away and like start to study directing. And so
And actually,
I
I kind of want to
yes,
just want to unfurl because I really want to get to this as we're talking about. I know that's what you're
yeah,
supposed to 30.
yeah,
I'll just keep unpicking this
absolutely.
because okay, so for working on that show, I presume it's like deadline. You have to get things out immediately. Your
Mhm.
process is like you're in a room, there's banter back and forth, but then going back into working kind of like mostly in a solitary space
Right,
on a
right.
big longer form project. Like I wonder, would that kind of take you back more to your stand-up roots where you're kind of performing a long
Mhm.
form show and your approach to like what is your process? Like how do you kind of get the ideas onto the page? Like are you kind of like investigating theme? Do you start from characters? Like what's your process there as well?
Yeah. Oh my God, God, you're a fantastic question asker. That's not really, there's probably a more elegant way to say question asker, but you're yeah, a great interviewer. Those great questions. Um, I will say it's interesting to like look at how my writing process was then through the lens of how I write now, because my process has evolved quite a bit and gotten much more, hopefully sophisticated. At the time, it was very much like just grunt work. Do you know what I mean? I thought of a movie that I wanted to see, and then I kind of sat down to write it. And I didn't have a lot of experience writing long form, and I definitely didn't have any experience writing screenplays. And so it didn't come from character; it came from outcome. And I do think that's the way that a lot of young writers start. You start with outcome. I want to write a horror movie, featuring, group of young friends, or I want to write a family comedy, with a romantic twist. You kind of start with like, something you want to emulate. So at the time, because I very much I love the genre space, and I think there's so few women directing in genre doing like horror and action, and so it was a combination of that was the stuff that I really cared about, and it also was where I felt like there was like a lack of female voices, and so I was like, great, I'm going to write a female action buddy comedy, right? And so I mean, honestly, the movie that I wrote was a female Lethal Weapon, but I don't think I had, because again, I didn't go through the traditional training, like pathways. I didn't go to film school. It was very much like I just was gutting it out. I was sitting down and trying to write a movie that I wanted to see, like really starting with kind of the shapes of and the beats of like movies I had seen previously. I mean, I do think there's value. I don't think there's value in being derivative. Obviously, I think originality is important, and I think because there is so much derivation in the entertainment business, we all seem to be making the same movie over and over again. But I
Even though
do think that
Archer is like an homage, a nod, a
yes, but
satire
it's its
of,
own animal,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes, yes. I think that satire. I think that's synthesis, right, is really important and can be really exciting. One thing about Archer is it's also quite literally commentary. You know what I mean? And in a variety of different ways on a variety of different kind of social points. It's commenting. Socio-political. Sexual, social, right? Gender wars. I mean, there's so much that it's commenting on within the format of kind of a satirical take on a spy movie. So
Your
but
project existing in this space, it's like creating something in that space. I'm curious to, yeah, that you're taking what has come before and acknowledging it, and then how
mhm,
much of you then is going into it as
right,
creative. Because you've like in stand up, it's like only you, like you are
right,
the
right, and
you
and
are the
and
story.
even in stand up, when you're commenting on what's happening around you, what's going on in culture. I mean, the whole point is to make it as specifically you as you can possibly make it. I mean, 100 comics talk about being married, or 100 comics talk about their relationship with their parents, but the whole goal is how can the thing you're saying be specifically and uniquely your own point of view, your own experience. And if you're doing it well, it's something that no one else could say but you. And I think that maybe that experience, that training, helped me become a writer. It's like there's only so many things to talk about. There's only so much of the human experience. What makes it interesting or compelling, I think, in any art form is that you are doing something and you are expressing ideas that are so specifically native to your experience of the world. And you're pushing yourself. You really have to push yourself, because I think the inclination, and I also think outside forces will push artists to be, what are you like? What is this movie like? I mean, the log line is all about Lethal Weapon meets Bridget Jones' Diary. You know what I mean? Everyone's looking for something that the thing is like, but as an artist, I think the goal is to say this is not like anything you've seen before.
And
But
you're
when I was
selling it.
starting out, I was very much, what's that?
The purpose is selling it. It's like you have to package it as your creativity as a commodity so that
Yes.
like I mean, and that's their job, but there is something about those two opposing intentions that like definitely can be difficult to navigate.
Yes, yes, and I think that's something that artists are trying to do constantly. And when we talk a little bit more about the film with the flower, I'll give you a really great story, a really great set story about exactly that specific thing. But I mean, I think that's the tightrope we're all walking, which is how can I make something that people recognize, but that is still specifically my own, because you are competing in this glutted environment, and human beings tend to gravitate towards what they recognize and what they understand. I mean, I think that's just a challenge constantly. So I mean, to tie off the conversation about like the process, early on it was very much like, this is stuff I like, I'm going to write something like the stuff I like and hopefully make it different. And that was how I started out. And I wouldn't, I was a joke writer, so everything that I was writing early on was very comedy driven. You know what I mean? It was very jokey, maybe not as character driven as now that I understand kind of how to start with character first, and then the jokes are the character is the ice cream and the jokes are the cherry on top of the sundaes. And back then it was just all cherries, no ice cream, probably. But I do think that for people that are listening that are filmmakers or writers or in any aspect of the art world, iteration is super important, right? you have to do it and then do it again and then do it again. And as you move through the process, and this is a perfect story that harkens back to that time and I think is really relevant. When I was a baby comedian, I would a way that a lot of young comedians will get experience is that they will befriend an older, more experienced comedian, and they'll give them like 5 or 10 minutes. Like, hey, come in when I'm headlining a show, and I'll give you 5 minutes before I go up, and you can work it out. It's great, no pressure on you. You know, you're not that well established. No one really cares. But if the comedian who's headlining says, hey, this is Aisha Tyler, guys, she's really funny, you'll get that kind of like benefit of the doubt with the crowd, and they'll give you some time. So I befriended some really like supportive older comedians, and one of them was this guy named Tom Rhodes, who was so lovely, and he was really well established. He was killing it, you know, he was so funny. And I went up to him one night and said, listen, I want to be like you. What do I do? What do I do to get to be like you? I want to do what you do. And he said, well, you just got to keep getting up on stage. You just got to keep getting up. And I remember at the time being like, you just don't want to tell me the secret. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's not advice. I need like a trick. And of course, now I realize that it's absolutely the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours. You just have to keep doing it over and over again. Things that were so hard for you in those first 100 hours become innate after 5,000 or 10,000 hours. Things just start to make sense. You start to really get a lot of creative clarity, not just about how things work functionally, but how you work as an artist. So, those early times were just iteration. I wrote a script, it was no good. I wrote another one, it was no good. And they just slowly got better and better. And I got input, and I learned, not just by talking to other artists, but, you know, I consume an insane amount of film. When I'm home and I'm kind of, you know, in my element, I watch a film a day. I'm always watching. I'm always trying to learn. And I think that's important. You know, again, I said, you don't want to be derivative, but you do want to understand what works and what doesn't. And the best way to do that is just to be consuming and analyzing and thinking about your medium at all times. Oh, that was a very long answer to your short
And
question.
it's not even there yet. Like I'm gonna kind of dig in then as well in
Okay,
terms
great.
of performance and like understanding character and working on big sets then in that scope. Do you
Mhm.
feel like being part of different elements of that process give you a better understanding then when you go into the helm?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Beautifully articulated. I really feel like even though you know I'm moving into directing in a really focused and intense way, being a generalist is really important in the film business. And what I mean is you need to understand how every department works, and understanding how another department works will make you better at the job in your department. Once I started directing, it made me a better actor. When I was starting out, the way that I started directing was I just started directing. I really wanted to learn. So after I'd been shadowing, I'd gone on a lot of shows and, you know, just sat behind a lot of directors, asking questions, watching them work. I got a camera and I told everybody, all the bands, I had a lot of friends that were musicians. I said, if you let me hang out with you for a few days, I'll make you a free music video. You don't have to use it. It's a gift, but this is an opportunity for me to do something, learn about myself as a director, be kind of radically creative because, you know, music videos don't really have any rules. And then you get a free music video. And so I did that for a bunch of friends, and it was really great. But I was doing everything. I was operating the camera, I was editing the pieces, I was color correcting, I was doing every single part of that process. And it was super hard, and it was great because it just, you know, I remember the first thing I shot, I was like, oh my God, I made so many mistakes because now I'm editing it and I don't have the stuff that I want. You know what I mean? And so every single time I went through that process from kind of like tip to tail of you know, delivering a filmed piece, the next one I was like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do differently here. So absolutely, the more exposure you have to the crafts, and I really do think that like the idea of like stay in your lane. I understand why people talk about that on a film set, you know, because the departments are the departments, but being curious, I guess, is the best way to express the way to get better. Is just to be deeply curious about how things work. Everybody loves to talk about how they operate and what their job is. And so asking people about their process and how they got to that, and could you show me how you do that? It's just a great way to understand, you know, this animal that is filmmaking. There's that proverb about the elephant in a dark room, and everybody's feeling a different part of the elephant, and they all think it's something different. Do you know what I mean? And I definitely think that people can fall prey to that in filmmaking, where they only understand their department, and so they're frustrated with how other departments are operating, or they're not giving the other departments the best tools to succeed. And I think as a director, it is your job. It is the core of your job is to create an environment where all of your crew will be successful. You are trying to create an environment where everybody will not just do their job, but excel at their job. And so, for me, in my opinion, directing is being a great coach. You want to hire really talented people and then create an environment where they can shine. And of course, it's your vision. It's always going to be your vision. It's your show. But the better you can empower people to succeed and to really bring you their best work and to feel like they can ask the right questions and they can volunteer ideas, you will get something bigger and better than you ever could have envisioned or created on your own. So that curiosity and that intentional engagement with people is what's really going to deliver the best results for you as a director.
So then in terms of like developing your process, you're now writing more scripts, thinking about story in a different way, in a more visual way, I presume, and in that kind
Mm-hmm,
of
mm-hmm,
3D way where you're
mm-hmm.
like, working at the logistics as you're thinking what's best to the story. Like, are you now in like at the stage in your creative process where you're like, this is me, this is my voice, or are you constantly like adjusting, realigning, or is
Right.
there like a kind of vein of that going through it and you're trying to find it? Like where are you now in your process?
It's that's you're just a font of brilliant questions. Um, so it's a question I ask myself all the time. Like, have I arrived at like a clear sense of what my voice is? And I think the answer is yes and no. I'm much clearer about who I am as a filmmaker and what I want my films to say and how I want them to feel and to make people feel than I was when I was younger. But I do always think about the fact that I want to keep evolving. Like I feel very much as an artist that if you get to the point where you've kind of grown as much as you're ever going to grow, like you might as well stop. So for me, it is always about pushing yourself to constantly reassess your skill set, your point of view, your approach. I actually just finished a screenplay, and what was exciting about writing this one was that I'm so much more experienced as a director now that I had so much more clarity in the writing of like this shot is going to go into this shot, and we're going to shoot this way. Whereas previously, I was just thinking about story and characters, and now I feel like I'm seeing the whole elephant when I write. You know what I mean? I'm seeing this. I see exactly how it's going to funnel through all the way to picture lock. So, uh, but this is a good time to tell you this set story from. I hope we can still be friends because as we're making it, one question I kept asking myself is this unique enough? Is it specific enough? Like, am I really doing something that feels different? And if I didn't feel that way, I was really pushing myself to make it more specific, more angular. And at one point, I was standing next to my script supervisor behind the monitors, and I said, "Man, this is a weird ass film." And she goes, "It's good though. We need more weird films." And I was like, "You're right. Like the worst. A kind of criticism would be like, I've seen that before. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like that other movie. I think specificity is so important in art and it is so hard to accomplish. And so you have to always be asking yourself those questions. And I think there are a lot of directors that we all really admire out there that have done extraordinary work, have great bodies of work. The ones that keep being exciting are the ones that are always pushing themselves outside of their comfort zone. Because we all know, and I'm not trying to beat anybody up, but we all know there are these directors who have been successful for a long time. And you can think, well, that dude's kind of lost it. And I think it's because they just keep repeating themselves, or they think everything I do is genius, no questions, no notes, right? No kind of self-reflection. And then the stuff that they do, it's kind of lost its soul. So I do think I'm clear about who I am as a filmmaker now, but I'm excited to keep developing new clarity about it as I move forward.
And I was wondering if you could talk to me a little bit more about your creative relationship with Emmett Hughes. So he
Mm-hmm.
is co-writer on this. He's like an amazing like what shoulders of a performance, what a intensity of a performance. And it's not the first time you've locked him in a tiny space. So I was wondering if you could
Yes,
talk to
yes,
me about your relationships as creatives and then how this project formed as a result.
absolutely. Um, so I'll go back. It's interesting. I think there are several directors out there who become kind of what's the right word? There's a word in theater. It's not coming to my head right now. Another word for like like company artist, where you kind of end up working with the same team of creatives over and over again. I think there are several directors who, the Coen brothers are one, where you just kind of end up, working with people that you really enjoy. Steven Soderbergh is another. Um, the Emmett and I met when at a really interesting time in my creative life. I think Oprah talked about this later, but I'm going to decide that it was my idea first. I was going through this year of yes, right? I was like, I'm just going to start saying yes to everything. I want to have new experiences. I want to grow as a person. And I was at Comic-Con, for people that don't know, is this big kind of, creative conference every summer in San Diego, in California.
There's
And
a lot here. They're everywhere. Yeah, they're
oh,
great.
perfect. So yes, I was at San Diego
Probably not as
Comic-Con,
big as
and
celebrities.
yeah, but they're great, and they're so fun, and they're such a great experience and an opportunity for people to kind of interact with the shows and the people that they like. So I was moderating a panel on the show Penny Dreadful. And John Logan, who's the showrunner and is an amazingly accomplished, yes, was shooting in
Shot here.
Ireland, and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was
shot here.
amazingly accomplished, in Wicklow. And he said, and I was a big fan of the show, and he said, you should come visit. And people say that in the business all the time. You're like, oh yeah, and you never do it. And I was like, I'm going to Ireland. And I go to Ireland, and I go to the set of Penny Dreadful and a shadow on that show. And I was really lucky. I approached Vikings was shooting right down the road, and I said, "Can I come shadow there too?" And they said yes. So I said, "I'm going to Ireland by myself. I'm going to be brave, and I'm going to go hang out on these shows." And I had great experience. I was like, I just felt so welcomed. Shadowed on both shows. The Vikings set was incredible. It was such a great experience. And through some friends, I met a bunch of Irish artists, and Emmett Hughes was one of the people that I met when I was in Dublin. And he's a filmmaker. He's already made his first feature, a movie called The O'Briens, this kind of family comedy that he made for, I'm probably overestimating. I think it was like $15,000 or something like that. I mean, it was really like just this force of will made his first feature in Galway. And he was like, "Do you want to make a short film here?" And I was like, "Yeah, do I want to shoot a short film in Ireland?" I mean, yeah, like I can't say yes fast enough. So he wrote a film for me, and he produced it. It was called Irscola Kayla, and we shot it in Galway at the end of 2014. And it was just this great experience. It was my first narrative short. I'd done a lot of music shorts and these kind of nonverbal pieces, and that was my first short where people spoke. And it was just this really lovely experience. And so we became friends on that. And then he said, "Listen, I've got a feature. Would you be interested in directing it?" And I remember very vividly being like, oh no, this script is going to be terrible. And then we're not going to be able to be friends anymore. I'm going to have to turn him down. And this is going to be the end of this friendship. And I read it, and it was just a great idea. It was a great first film for me because it was very contained. So it was called Axis, AXIS, and it was a movie that was set entirely on a single afternoon in a car. And actually, the script is originally was set at night, and so I loved it because I really think that first film needs to be something manageable, something with problems that you can solve as an artist, something that you can really exploit and do something that feels like special. And so I said, yes, let's make this take place during the day so that we can have that secondary set. Like the primary set was the car, but then the secondary set was like all of Los Angeles. We can really exploit this car moving through LA, and we can see this beautiful scenery going by. And we reconcepted that movie, and we shot it in the spring of 2016. And it was the toughest thing I've ever done. And I remember thinking, like, what if I direct this film and I hate it? Like, what am I going to do? But it was just like, it was the greatest experience of my life. And everything went wrong. Everything went wrong on that movie. We crowdfunded it, and we made kind of our initial goal, but we didn't make our stretch goal. So originally we had it boarded for 9 days. And I was like, well, if we shoot it in 7 days, we'll have more money per day, and it'll afford us a third camera. And we needed to have a police escort because we were driving through Los Angeles at like rush hour. And so we had 7 days to make a feature. We had this really robust plan for our production plan where we're shooting 3 cameras every day. And then so we shot the whole script. And then the next day we repositioned cameras and shoot the whole script. And that's how we made that film. And it was such a robust plan that by day 3, I had the movie in the can. And so the final 4 days were just adjustments and, reconcepting. But it was so robust. We had so much footage that on it was actually the second day, I feel like, we got out on the road kind of late. It was the first day rigging the car. We had a lot of technical problems, and it was just such a different time of day that we couldn't get that footage to match the rest of the footage. The temperature was just off. There was no way to correct it, and we had to throw that whole day of footage out. But it didn't matter because we had 6 other days of footage. And so it just turned out so perfectly. And I remember like we got stuck behind a jackknife big rig one day. We got stuck in a parking lot one day. We had a day where the car battery died, and we had to unrig all 3 cameras and all our lighting stuff and re-rig it in the middle of the street. But it was just like I was alive, you know what I mean? I was like, oh, this is what I was put on the planet to do. So so that was Access, and it was just a really fruitful experience. I thought I'll put this on Vimeo, so I have a directing sample, but it ended up getting into 10 festivals and it won some awards, and that was kind of I was off to the races at that point, and that became a really fruitful collaborative relationship. And it's he's gone out, he's a producer and he's made other films, and then we came back together to do I Hope We Can Still Be Friends. And that had been a film that he had also been kicking around for a while and shared with me. And it was a very different concept when we first started talking about it. Um, but I always feel like, and for people that are listening, one of the reasons why I love the genre space is that when it's done really well, it's not just a horror movie. It's not just an action movie. It's really a movie about the human condition. And so I really wanted to make I Hope We Can Still Be Friends, something that was about something bigger than the moment. And we worked really hard to kind of bring some big themes into this film about a guy waking up in a box.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the grand scheme, what is it? Ryan Reynolds woke up in a box, didn't he? Like
Ryan Reynolds woke up in a box.
Colin
Yeah. And
Farrell was in a phone
phone
booth,
booth.
and now
Oh, yeah.
Emmett is in a deep wooden box. So I would love for you to tell me maybe about the different iterations of that. I love to see how projects sort of evolve and change. Like so
Yeah.
in terms of your input, are you and him exchanging notes, exchanging drafts? Are you being kind of given big picture information? How does that kind of process work in terms of, getting towards being ready to, yeah, try and resource it?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so interesting because I always feel like, you have that first draft, or, that draft that everybody feels like, this is something we can shoot. Um, but then you're always, again, and this is harkening back to the idea of like, how can I make this feel different? You brought up some films that I think were really good references, and they were single location films. And so once we were working on this, I went back and I watched every film that was essentially like a guy in a room. So, phone booth, uh, buried, room, a moon. You know what I mean? Any film that really had like a kind of, and there are a lot of them out there that aren't particularly transfixing. And I mean, even Moon, which is just Sam Rockwell. And we did not have those kind of resources. So you're also kind of shooting for the money that you have. But what I felt like was when you hear Guy Wakes Up in a Box, you definitely think like, you think Buried, or you think like, The Bride and Kill Bill, we needed to make something that felt captivating for 90 minutes. And I said, we're just going to counter program. We're going to really think about this in a different way. And so once we started doing that, thinking about how can this feel different from what you anticipate when you think Guy wakes up buried underground,
And what was the
it
date?
became,
I'm just curious because again, like there's a lot of themes of like isolation and like in terms of where
yes,
it sits
yes,
post-COVID,
yes,
that
yes.
claustrophobic being stuck inside.
I really wanted to examine the idea of someone who doesn't feel as if they need anyone, and then they are in a situation where they don't have anyone, and what does that feel like? Because the fact of the matter is, as creatures, as animals, human beings are desperately dependent on interaction with other human beings. And we did just go through an experience. We were all very isolated, and for a lot of people that was really, really difficult to endure. The human animal is, we are a collective animal. We are a social animal. It's how we evolved, and we really languish. We languish and we wither without human contact. There are so many studies out now about how older people will their health will fail incredibly rapidly if they don't have human interaction. And the best way to live a long life is to have social interaction, is to have friends and family. And it's, I mean, to put it in Irish terms, it's something that I think um, people who aren't from a pub culture don't understand that the pub is not just the place you go for a pint. It's the place you go for the crack, for the scale. You know what I mean? You need those interactions. It's our nature. And so what happens is someone who thinks, hey, I'm good on my own. I don't need anyone, and then they really don't have anyone. And who do they become? And I read a lot about when we decided about how we were going to build this box. Uh, I read a lot about what social what sorry what solitary confinement does to prisoners. There's a lot, unfortunately, because it's so widespread. There's a lot of study about what happens to the human mind when they're alone. People start to hallucinate. First of all, people start to get engaged in self-talk within 24 hours. And I don't doubt that, because I talk to myself all the time when I'm alone. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh, time to make dinner. Oh, I can't believe you dropped that on the ground. Self-talk is a very common human behavior. But people start to hallucinate very quickly. I mean, almost within a week, people start to lose the ability to discern, real from imagine, and start to lose their social skills, and then start to lose their practical and motor skills. They have told people out of solitary confinement who can't figure out how to read a map or make a phone call. It happens really, really fast. And so this was really a study about isolation and about self-identity, and about how really a lot of how we see ourselves is how we see ourselves reflect back, within the view of other people. So yeah, so it's really a meditation on human beings and our need for interaction. And there's lots of secrets in the film that I don't want to give away, but I think it's very much also a study of how we see ourselves, what the lies that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and how those lies help us move through the world and help us maybe justify a lot of behavior that if we looked at ourselves more clearly, we would realize is unacceptable. So yeah, and I think you bringing up COVID is really salient. I think for some people, COVID was really an opportunity to grow, and then for a lot of other people, once society, and this is a very long answer, but
No, it's
one of
brilliant.
the reasons why I love zombie fiction. I love up kind of post-apocalyptic fiction, and I've been really lucky to direct some of the Walking Dead shows. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, that's about zombies. I'm like, no, these shows are about the human nature. And they always ask the same question: are we essentially good, or are we essentially bad? And what happens when societal rules fall away and we are left to our own devices? Who do we become? Are we, by our very nature, do we default to goodness? Or are we evil? And I think that's the biggest human question of all. It's the question that religion asks. It's the question that, social construct asks. Like, do we need to be forced to be good, or can we be good on our own? Can we be good without encouragement? And so I think during COVID, this feeling of like, are we going to default to being the kind of people who help our neighbors, who, go out onto the balconies in Italy and sing together in the apartment building? Or are we going to close off and harden ourselves and keep all our resources and not share and not be kind? And I think it's a question that we still are seeing right now in the world all around us, right?
Well,
our
the psychology
yeah.
of him is fascinating, and I think it's something the film does explore. And I'm and even just maybe not even in that specific, like bigger picture sense, but just in that sense of like one person's fractured relationship to themselves, and
Mm-hmm.
like the pain that causes everyone else and themselves was something that
And themselves.
and themselves, like I always say, like that personality type can never be truly happy, like never,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like, and there's a
Yeah.
tragedy to that. And I think this explores it very well, and it's such an intimate film in so many ways. And I wonder, like, with Emmett being a writer on it, did you like then to direct that performance and get that performance from him, like have to detach him from that? Did you like, or was he so in tune with it? It was easier. Like, were there certain beats
Mm.
that you would be finessing for more drama? Just like
Mm-hmm.
because when you're wearing multiple hats, like okay, so it's all about telling a story, but when you're wearing multiple hats like that, and again, when you're kind of coming to the subject matter from a different angle, I do think it changes your relationship to it a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's really good. And I think the best artists are about separating the writing experience from the performance experience. And I think that's something that's very important for performers. Um, but it's also important for the director to help the actor get there. So for me, I always want that actor to feel very safe when I'm directing. It can be a fearful experience to put yourself out there as an actor. It's very vulnerable. You're worried you're not going to look good. You're worried you're going to make bad choices, and it's my job to tell that actor, like, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure that. So my coffee maker's making a noise. Sorry. I'm going to make sure that your performance is going to be extraordinary. So you can relax and you can feel safe and you can take risks. Try it a bunch of different ways. I promise you, the best one will make it in the show. Some, and I understand why some actors feel protective of themselves. And that's a really that's human nature. It is really the director's job to create an environment where they feel safe. And so I work very hard to do that. Maybe I'm a little bit better at it because I've been on the other side of that process for such a long time, but it's my job to create a space of safety so that it can be a space of radical creation, right? You want people to really step out of themselves and try things they might not try if they felt timid. He is very good at separating the writer from the actor and to say, once I'm on set, I'm surrendering to this process and that part of it is over. And I'm also good, I hope anyway, at coming in when someone's struggling and going, let's talk about this for a minute. How are you feeling? What about saying it this way? What about trying it this way? You just want to create this crucible of freedom for your artists. And I like I was saying earlier, that's the director's job for everybody on the set. But especially once the cameras start rolling, you really want those actors to just feel super safe. So yeah, he didn't really struggle with by the time we got to the and we did a bunch of early work before we ever got into those boxes because we shot this movie in 11 days. We knew it was going to be difficult. We were shooting in January in Galway. It was absolutely freezing cold. Our actors were,
Damp, so damp.
yeah, I mean, Caroline was dressed, but Emmett was like in his underpants, so he was really like freezing cold, and so we needed a lot of clarity going in, but we did a lot of table reads earlier. We talked through all the beats, we talked through the emotional beats, we talked through the mechanics of it, so that everybody felt very confident once they stepped inside that set, that we had a plan and they could just relax. But I will say, I remember when we built the boxes, I stepped into the box that Emmett was in, and this is interesting. I got really upset and not angry, just upset. I thought, oh God, this would be a really horrible thing to happen to someone. And I thought about, again, the people that are kept in, solitary confinement, which, globally has been, essentially deemed, cruel and unusual punishment and torture. And I think immediately when you are in that space, in that confined space, just as a human, as a living creature, you will immediately step into a specific kind of emotional state. So I think that really did help both of them get to where they needed to be, performance-wise.
And then in terms of, okay, so landing, getting everything you need on the shoot, I presume it's intensive. Was there any sort of, like, nothing ever goes smoothly? And this
Oh
is
yeah, no,
filmmakers, so I'm not going
yeah.
like, but like, was there anything that kind of really you had to step back, reassess, and pivot?
Yeah, yes, that's a great question. So yes, nothing ever goes your way, that's not right. Not everything never goes your way. You know what I mean? Things are going to go. Lots of things are going to go your way, but never everything never goes your way. We planned for that, and I can't emphasize enough to filmmakers who are listening. You got to prep your brains out, and then you got to prep it again, and you got to anticipate that something's going to go wrong, and you have to have a plan for when it does, because it will go wrong, and it will never be the thing that you think is going to go wrong. It's going to be something out of total left field. So we were shooting very aggressively, 10-hour days with like a walk away lunch. So like, it wasn't, we didn't have money for overtime. We had to really go very quickly. And I had a great team. I had a great first and second AD. They were both brilliant. They really just super organized and on it. And communication's really key. You need to be talking to your ADs all the time, all day long. Like, I love to be all like, wherever we're on a lighting interval, okay, let's talk about timing. Where are we now? Where should we be? Are we early? Are we late? Like, you always want to, because that helps you make decisions as you're moving through the day. You don't want to have it be an hour before wrap and you're surprised about the fact that you have a major day. And that feeling of like constant communication keeps everybody on their toes, keeps everybody connected to the material. So I had a really, really incredible crew, all Irish. I was the only non-Irish person on the show. Um, but yeah, we shot a scene one day, and it was a big culminating emotional scene for the movie. I won't say what it is because I don't want to give it away, but it was a big one. It was a really, really big turning point. And I got in the car, and I was like, yeah, that didn't play, and it's not going to work in the movie. It's not playing. And then I got on with Emma and I said, listen, I don't think that scene played. He said, I don't think it did either. And I said, we gotta change it, and we have to reshoot it. Now, who has the time and money for that? Nobody. But it had to be done, and we were not going to be able to come back and shoot it at a later date. We had to shoot it, and we had to get it in. And so I called my first rec, and I was like, "Listen, we got to reshoot that scene. It didn't work. So we got to reconfigure tomorrow. We've got to rebuild that, and we're going to shoot it first."
And did you know that in
And
the moment, or were you watching the rushes that night? Did you, or was it
I knew
rush
as soon as
like,
I got in the car, like we wrapped and I got in the car, I was like, it wasn't effective. And then I talked to Emmett about it. He said, yeah, it didn't feel emotionally effective for me either. You know what I mean? We just knew you just knew right away. And I think if I was a younger director, I probably wouldn't have picked up on that. And I would have just been in the cut and been like, this isn't playing. But thankfully I've done this now enough that right away I was like, that did not work. So we reconcepted the scene and we reshot it the next day. And as we were shooting it, I was like, this is so much better because we were so well prepped and so well organized. We were able to accommodate that kind of dynamism. And one of the things that we did with this was we actually boarded the film over 10 days. I hired my editor before we started shooting. So he started getting our dailies on the second day, like the morning of our second day of filming. He already had like the first day's rushes or dailies. And so he started cutting immediately. So we were getting an assembly as we were filming. And so he was able to say, hey guys, I have the scene put together, but I'm missing this shot, or I want you to know that this thing is not matching exactly right. And so what we did was day 11 was for pickups. So we had a full day to go, and we just were checking off elements that we didn't have or elements that needed to be reshot. And that was, again, such a robust way to work because, we're not a big Hollywood production that's going to go back in 6 months and do 6 weeks of additional pickups for more millions of dollars. I mean, it was now or never. And I just had such confidence going into post that I had everything that I needed because I was getting feedback from my post team. I was talking about it constantly. I will say this, and this is probably just like so naughty to say out loud. People are going to clutch their pearls. I don't always watch the dailies because I don't have the time. I have, once I wrap, I've got to make sure that I'm prepped for the next day, that I've done my homework for the next day. And taking another hour to look backwards is not always like the ideal way to spend my time. I also need to be super well rested so that I can be at my best for my cast and my crew. And lots of directors have lots of different opinions about this. I've heard directors who are like, you know what you shot. You only watch dailies if you don't think you have it. And I other directors like, I watch every single minute of dailies, even if I don't sleep. I really feel like my job, once I'm wrapped for the day, is to make sure that tomorrow is going to be the best day it can be. And so I only watch it back if I'm worried. But I also have lots of other people who are also looking at the rushes who can tell me. And I know on the day I turn to my script supervisor, I'm like, that was it. That was it. I'm marking all my, I'm marking my specials. I mark my favorites and everything like that. So I don't stop shooting until I know that I have the scene. So I typically go home knowing in my gut that I have what I need. And it was just an emotional feeling. I said that the emotion that I want people to feel when they watch that scene, we just didn't get it. So we reshot it. As we were shooting it, tears were rolling down my face. I'm like, this is it, we did it, we got it. And then we just kept pushing and moved with alacrity to get the rest of the show. And because we had that 11th day for overflow, and we did end up overflowing into that day a little bit, but that's what it was set up for. And we shot all our pickups. It wasn't even a full day. That last day was maybe like a 2/3 day. So we really were able to get it done. I really encourage people as you're planning your project, there's a million aphorisms about, planning. A lot of them come from the military. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? All that stuff. But you cannot figure it out on the day. You have to know what you're doing going in because it is going to fall apart no matter what you do. And if you are prepared, you will be nimble enough to pivot. And if you're not prepared, things are going to fall apart. And it's kind of an accumulate, it's like a snowball. Like once things start to unravel, if you aren't able to right the ship, this is why movies fall apart, and this is why people wash out because they were just like, we'll see how it goes. And no one has the time or money to just kind of like wing it on a movie set.
Some people do. Very, very, very,
Well, some
very.
people, yes,
It's so
maybe if you're
expensive.
Michael Bay, you know what I mean? But even nowadays, these huge budget movies, these $220 million movies, they they're so bloated and they have so much money and so much resources that they do wing it and then you can see the result. You know what I mean?
And I was wondering, can I ask you one more question? I kind of
Yes, you can ask me two more
Oh yeah.
questions.
Okay,
Go
well
for
I'll
yes,
ask you
please.
two together
Yes,
and we'll
please.
close it out because
Yeah.
I thank you so much as well for taking this time. It's
What a
just
pleasure.
I like honestly I could again and then I could the picking apart. I was like I could keep doing that for every process, but I won't.
I
I would
love
leave this
it.
I would leave this with this. So having wrapped on it and having edited it and having kind of sat with it for a while and it now existing as part of your creative output as an artist, as a storyteller, like, ha do you feel like what was your kind of conclusion? What was your takeaway after this? That like were there moments that you've learned? Are you satisfied? Like it's kind of like open in terms of like, do you know like everything is so unique. I don't want to even like after this, how has this kind of changed or enriched you as an artist? And then the like a little kind of subtext at the end of that is what would you hope audiences take away from this with its screening in Galway?
Amazing. So, yeah, oh God, okay. So, really good question. I feel like what was exciting about this was that I really pushed myself uh, to do something that felt really dreamlike and unusual. I really was like, I do a lot of television directing, and in that process, you have a brief, and you've got to deliver to the brief, and it's very um, there's not a lot of opportunities to be super original or to step outside the look and feel of the show. On a TV show, you got the script, you know what the show's going to look like, you know what the feel of it is, and within that framework, you're trying to kind of inject it with your own personality, but there are bumpers on that, right? There's limits. So when I get the opportunity to do something that's uniquely mine, I really do try to push myself to do something that feels unusual and specific. Um, so for this film, I was really happy that there are specific beats in here that are really very unusual and very beautiful. There's a piece in there that we shot and then we cut it and recut it and recut it. And I was like, it's got to be stranger. It's got to feel more ethereal, and it was really fun to kind of push into this really unusual space with some of the pieces in the film. We hired an amazing Irish composer. She's so extraordinary, and she did this. It was the same thing I said. I really want this score to be really weird, man. Like I really want it to feel like you haven't heard this kind of music anywhere else. And she just did such an amazing job. And you guys have the same first name. And
Gemma
she,
Doherty. Yeah, I saw.
yes,
I was
yes,
just
yes,
sneakily trying to
she's
go on
so
to IMDb there
wonderful.
to look her up. Yeah.
Yeah, she's just it was it. I hope that she enjoyed the process as much as I did because again, I think when you're composing for a film, a lot of times people want like they want this kind of very stringy score, and and I was like, I want this to really be startlingly unusual. um so I think hopefully what I got out of this process was a better sense of my creative identity. I hope that this movie is very unusual. It's probably not going to be for everybody, but that's great because I don't think art should be. I think it's got to be, some people are going to love it, some people are not going to connect to it. I think that's the nature of interesting art. I always think it's better for half the room to love it, half the room to hate it, than for everybody to be like, it's all right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, like I'm a big fan of black pudding. It's not for everybody, but man can't get enough. I used to smuggle it out of Ireland when I was visiting. You can't get good Irish black pudding in America. So yes, don't tell. Yes, also the statute of limitations on me smuggling meat into the United States is over, so
Oh
nobody
yeah.
send me a letter.
I got I
Yeah.
got I got caught with a cucumber once, and I was like, oh, no.
Whoops. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I really do feel like I have a much better sense of my voice as a director after this film. I also I love actors, and it was a really great experience to work with these two actors and to hopefully help support them in making in turning in really compelling performances. So I definitely feel like, like I said, I just finished a script, and I feel like this last process really helped me like cement my writing voice as well, because I did take a pass on this script, with Emmett, and we pushed each other to really make like really unusual choices with the performances. So yeah, so I just feel like I've grown. It was a tough. I mean, like, just for the framework for people. I think I said this at the top, but the goal here was to make a film in Galway with a Galway crew and submit it to the Fleadh. And we did it very quickly. We shot it in January. We locked picture at the first week of April, right before the late Irish film deadline. I mean, it was a sprint, and I had 8 weeks for a post. I ended up asking my post team to work an extra 3 days because we locked it. I wanted to get a note session. I brought some other people in to give me notes. They watched it. For people who are watching, nothing more nerve wracking than the first time having strangers watch a baby, And I was sitting in the back of the room, kind of with my hoodie up, peeping out like it looked like a sand Jawa from Star Wars. And it was great. They leaned forward at the points I wanted them to lean forward. They laughed. They were nervous. They were anxious. They were nodding when there were reveals. And so that was a really great experience. But we raced to get this thing done. And we got this film done nose to tail in 4 months. Not even 4 months, because it was the first week of April, so like 3 months. Um, so it gave me more confidence in my ability to complete, and to complete in a way that felt like, okay, yes, this is not because most of us as filmmakers were like, okay, that's it, it's not done, it's just like pencils down, hands up. That's really how you feel when you're making something. You never think it's done. And so to feel good about it, on that timetable, I think was really a good experience. Okay, what do I want people to take away other than that Aisha Tyler is incredibly long-winded? Let's see. you know Filmmaking and film going at its best is a transporting experience. You know what I mean? And we go to films to be transported, to have an experience that we can't have in our actual lives. Hopefully, people will be able to surrender to this, to the experience of this film. I got the executive producer of Criminal Minds, Erica Messer, who was a good friend and a brilliant writer and producer, to come and watch the film. And she's, after like 5 minutes, she goes, "Oh my God, I'm already losing it. Oh my God, I'm already so anxious." And I was like, "Great, okay, I did my job, right?" To go on this ride with these two characters. It's fun, it's scary, it's suspenseful, it's all these things. There's a fair amount of dark comedy in here. And then to ask himself the question, because I think it's the question we all ask ourselves every day, like, am I a good person? And I ask myself, and I think, for me anyway, I ask that question so that I can hopefully try to be a better person. I mean, that's why we're here, right? To try to leave a place better than we found it. And I think, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture, it doesn't have to be changing the world, but just being kind, moving through the world with kindness, I think is really important. And I think it has a ripple effect. If you're kind to the people around you, and that ripple moves outwards, then I think we can have a great effect on the planet. And I think this planet's the only one we got. So we got to take care of each other.
That is beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for chatting with us. It's Thursday, the
Oh,
10th of July, so it's 10:15 p.m. if anyone wants a fabulous late evening scare. In
yes. And we'll be there. The filmmakers will be there. We're going to do a Q&A. So come by, and we'd love to talk to you after the film.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Woohoo.
Oh, that was so lovely.
Oh, that was great.